Can you imagine that not all baby presents are meant for good? Grace was in a loving relationship with Michael. The two of them had been dating for the past 2 years. Everything was going well and smoothly until one day, after feeling a little sick for the past couple of days, Grace took a test and found out she was pregnant. She told Michael, and honestly, he was okay with it, He was like, look, let's not use this to rush into marriage. I love you. I'll be there. Let's have this child. We will be together. Let's have this child. And I will provide and take care of you guys. But let's not use this particular incident to rush into marriage. And so they did. They had a beautiful baby girl that they named Zanab. By the time Zanab was 2 years old, Grace and Michael were no longer dating. They were no longer in a relationship. Michael had moved away and started a relationship with somebody else. However, the two still co-parented very well. Michael was present in terms of financially, he was available, and he would occasionally visit Grace and Zanab. And Grace, on her part, was also doing perfectly fine. She had a job. Her daughter was thriving. People saw her as a bubbly, cute little ray of sunshine. She had friends everywhere she went. Family members and neighbors were all excited to hang out with baby Zanab. So all in all, life was great. I mean, what more could you ask for? By the time baby girl Zanab was turning 6, she was everybody's favorite little human being. A ray of sunshine, laughing, interacting. She had a lot of friends. She was in school. Everybody loved her. She was everybody's baby girl. So Grace decided that she was going to throw a very big birthday party for Zanab, invite all family, friends from school, their parents, neighbors, well-wishers, everybody. And to be honest, it was a big event. Michael came, he also spent money, he was there, he was present. It was such a loving environment. There was a person who was in charge of the gift table, setting it up, meeting all the guests, taking the gifts. Everything was a blast. And for the most part of that day, it was a great time. The birthday party was a great success. Everything was going well. Later, towards the evening, as the celebration was winding down, Grace started packing things. Friends and family members and people were just leaving. Some were still dancing, having a great time. As she was in the kitchen, she heard a loud shout, some screams, cries, and somebody shout, "Grace!" She rushed over to the pool in their compound, and there she saw Zanab with her leg injured, crying. As she got closer, she started asking questions. What happened? What's going on? What happened to my daughter? And people around her explained that, somebody gifted Zanab a frame. It was a glass frame. It dropped, it fell, it tore apart, and it cut her leg. And this cut was a big deal. It was a large gash along her leg. It was bleeding profusely. It looked like it would need stitches, and they had to remove all the little specks of glass inside. So quickly, they rushed Zanab to the hospital and got her treated. At the hospital, Grace started to ask questions. What happened? What was going on? How did this happen? And they told her that a gift had fallen, had smashed. But Grace said, I understand that part. I want to understand who brought this gift, who brought it to the table, who brought it here, how did we get it? And nobody really had the answer to that. Nobody said that they brought it themselves. The person who was in charge of the gift table says, I actually never received this gift. Nobody handed it to me and said, this is for Zanab. It literally just appeared on this table. And everybody was confused and perplexed. And Grace was like, that can't be true. That can't be possible. We need to figure out who sent this and why and how. Unfortunately, they never actually got the answer to that. That gift remained as mysterious as ever. Now, the doctors did tell her that this was a very gnarly looking wound. It did take quite a few stitches and it would take some time to heal. Week 1 passed. Week 2 passed, week 3 passed. The stitches were still in, but the wound wasn't sealing, it wasn't closing, it wasn't scabbing over. A month passed, 2 months passed, and by 3 months, Grace was getting this wound bandaged on a regular basis and it was not healing. So she took Zanab back to the hospital and explained that this thing happened 3 months ago, it's not healing. The doctors looked at it and said it's not infected, but it's just taking long to heal. Maybe she has a blood disorder. So month after month after month after month, they would go back to the hospital, bandage this injury over and over again. They would tell her that, it will take some time, it will take some time, it will take some time. All this for a year and still nothing. At this point, Grace was running out of options. She was running out of money. Like, she wasn't going broke, but she had spent so much money on medical bills and hospital bills and doctors and all sorts of things. She even started to think that at this point, it had to be spiritual. She has to just let God take the wheel. Until one night, after her 7th birthday, time passed. Zanab explained to her mother that, Mommy, I had a strange dream. in my dream, I was playing outside and then suddenly a wolf or a big dog came running at me and bit my leg exactly where my sore is. And when I woke up this morning, it was bleeding through the bandage. Now that was very odd. So Grace looked at her daughter and said, that's very strange. If you ever have this dream again, let me know. And lo and behold, again, a couple of months later, Zanab came to her mother and said, Mommy, I had the dream again. A wolf came and attacked me and it bit my leg. This dream situation kept reoccurring, and Grace could never understand why. Every single time Zanab would have such a dream, her wound would reopen, it would bleed, and it would soak through her bandages, and they'd have to rebandage it, try to stitch it up again. And all this time, this wound refused to heal. At this point, Grace really felt like this was completely spiritual. They spoke to pastors, they spoke to prophets, they talked to everybody possible. Nobody had a solution, none of the prayers worked, nothing. Eventually, Zanab and Grace had to make peace with the fact that this was their new normal. This is what Zanab grew up with. Years passed, and every year, every month, every week, she would bandage her wound. She would tie it. She would get new stitches on a regular basis. She would clean it. It would never get infected, but it would never heal. 1 year became 2 years, 2 years became 3, 3 became 5, 5 became 10, and every single year, Zanab grew with it. As she grew, so the wound stayed, continued to hurt her occasionally, but it refused to heal. And you know what? After a couple of weeks, months, and years, that starts to weigh on your soul. As a child, you can, brush it off a little bit. As you get into young teenager, as you get into young adulthood, Zanab felt like she constantly had to be covered. She always wore trousers. Even if she wore a skirt, she'd always have this huge bandage on her leg. And explaining it became such a story. The story would have to change. The incidents would be reported. People would ask a bunch of questions.
Hold up, wait, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Now let's go back to the show.
It really hit her self-esteem, and bubbly sunshine Zanab became a lot quieter. But as you do with things that injure you and things that you have to grow with, she grew up with it. By the time she was an adult, she was working in a bank and had figured out a routine that worked for her. At least at work, she wore long pants all the time, and she had learned to manage her condition. At this bank is where she met a young manager. Let's call him Tony. Now, Tony was a manager at a different branch, but they met one day during a staff get together and they instantly clicked. Tony, was interested. He started talking to her, wanting to get to know her, and they quickly started a rapport, built conversation, and started to get to know each other. Over the next few weeks and months, they started talking and eventually started dating. That too was going splendidly well. Zanab explained that, she had a leg injury and that is why her leg would bandage, but for the most part, things were going pretty fine. Now, one afternoon when Zanab was over at Tony's place, she ran into his mother. His mother was clearing out a couple of different books, albums, and things, and saw an old one and said, "Oh, Tony, my son, this is an old album from years ago. You went to this child's party." As the two of them looked into the album, Zanab goes, "Oh, wait, is that you?" Tony says, yeah, that's me as a child. It was a big party. I've completely even forgot about it, but it was a big deal back in the day. Zanab goes, "Really? Because that's me." And there it was, Zanab and Tony having met as little as children all those years ago. Upon that revelation, Tony's mind, he said, yeah, I am going to marry this woman. She is the one made for me, clearly. But he knew that before he started that quest to getting to marry Zanab, he had to put a couple of things in order. His first order of business was to reach out to his spiritual mother, Prophetess Gosalin. She was the one he went to when he wanted guidance and clarity on big life decisions. So he reached out to the prophetess and said, "Hi, I'd like to speak to you. There's somebody I want to marry and I want you to give me your advice, your input, any knowledge, information you have." Prophetess Gosalin said, "Oh yes, absolutely. Come to see me and bring her along." And that's exactly what Tony did. Tony and Zanab went to meet Prophetess Gosalin. Now, she sat with them, she spoke with them, she prayed, and then she looked at Zanab, shook her head, and then turned to Tony and said, "Hey, Tony, let me speak to you alone for 2 minutes." So they stepped out of the room, and Prophetess Gosalin spoke to Tony and said, "Tony, are you sure this is the woman you say you want to marry?" Tony said, "Yes, absolutely. I do truly believe in this." The prophetess said, "Okay, I understand you. However, hold on to that thought. I would like a moment to speak to her as well alone, so you wait a little before you put those plans in motion." Tony, of course, agreed because he knew Prophetess Gosalin was true and very strong and powerful in the Lord. She allowed Tony to sit outside and wait, and then she came back into the room and decided to speak to Zanab. She again closed her eyes, prayed a little bit, and then looked at Zanab and said, "Show me your leg." Noticing Zainab's shocked face, she said, "Yes, the Holy Spirit has revealed something to me and I would like to see your leg." So Zanab pulls up her trousers and removes the bandage and shows her her wound. Prophetess Gosalin looks at her and says, "How long have you had this?" So Prophetess Gosalin and Zanab are having their conversation, and Zanab explains that it happened when I was a child at a birthday party. Somebody gave me a gift. It fell down, broke, and cut me. We honestly never found out or figured out who had sent the gift, where the gift came from, but I've had this injury ever since. I've also had a reoccurring dream/nightmare where something comes and attacks this injury, whether it is an animal that bites it, whether I fall and hit myself on that leg. Something always happens in the dream in reference to this incident. Prophetess Gosalin looks at Zanab and says, "My dear, the person who brought this gift intended to harm you. The gift was intended to not only harm you, but eventually end your life. And it will if it stays. It is little by little draining your energy, draining your sustenance, draining your soul, and it will eventually take you before your time. However, I will give you a list of things to do, and I will pray and deliver you from this situation." So Prophetess Gosalin continues to speak to Zanab and prays for her, prays for the incident, prays about the injury, and tells her that, you know what, follow the steps I've given you and your leg should heal. A little skeptical at first, but you know what, Zanab had already tried everything throughout her life. What was one more rules and regulations to follow? So she did. In a month, she started to see that her leg was starting to heal. 2 months, 3 months, she hadn't had a dream regarding her leg, and finally the leg was closing, was healing, was scabbing over, and she would be free. It was working. Prophetess Gosalin had delivered her. But remember, Tony also had his own dreams and wishes and plans. So he came back to Prophetess Gosalin and said, "Oh, prophetess, now that you've delivered her and healed her, is what you saw gone? Can we now get married?" And Prophetess looked at him and said, "My child, the reason Zanab was put in your life wasn't for you guys to get married. It was for you to be able to guide her to me, for her to be delivered." And Tony insisted and said, "Oh, but prophetess, I want to marry this woman. Please tell me this is the right direction." Prophetess said, "Look, I understand that this is what your heart wants right now, but I'm telling you that that is not the will of God. So though it may be hard, please know that that is not the end for the both of you." Though it was hard, Tony and Zanab took this advice, this information from the prophetess and broke up. But you see, that was not the end of their story. Both of them are currently happily married to completely separate people. And you know what? This moment with Prophetess Gosalin shaped them fundamentally. This moment lives in their hearts and minds rent-free, and they truly feel like it was meant to be. I mean, now they're perfectly happy. They both are in separate, fulfilling relationships, doing well. Zainab's leg has completely healed with the very faint scar, just for her to look back and thank God that Prophetess Gosalin came into her life. And that's our story for today. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Follow us on YouTube at EntangledWebStories, and I'll catch you guys every single Saturday. And you guys have been asking me about which prophetess do I always mention. She is Prophetess Gosalin. You can catch her on TikTok. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye.